So here I
Hi,
am.
hi
So
there.
this is Kai. I know Kai for many, many years. We collaborated on a project about a scientist who named E. Just, and we won't talk about that too much because we want to talk about streaming. But I know him a long time, and he was early on into the online streaming business, and he's also a filmmaker and very active in organizations such as the organization of the 900 producers, independent producers in Germany. So I'm going to introduce him to introduce himself, and then we'll again talk a little bit between us about streaming, and then we'll entertain questions and comments about where we are and where we're going and how we got here.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I will call. I'd start with a quote from Isaac Asimov. He once said, "People with fantasy can always imagine how things can be better," and that's of course also our curse. And that's how I started in the online business, because I was a filmmaker. I make documentaries. I make films that I think should be done out of in a necessity, and I have the problem to reach my audience, and I had that problem kind of all my life. And of course, gather the finance to make the film, because it's much more expensive to make a film than to do a drawing or write a book even. When the internet came along, I was hired for a very new online agency. It was a time when you could still get the domain for Bacardi or Coca-Cola or so, because they hadn't really grasped what was rolling there. And I thought that was great. But at some point I missed telling stories. So I was only half-time. I was making films on the side, but I earned my bread and butter there. And then at some point, something came along. It was called The Real Player. Some of you might still remember it. It was the stamp size on the screen of your computer, and you could show a film there. And I said, wow, this is now really going. And at the time, I was in Singapore, actually, and I saw that they were streaming full screen there already, when we in Europe, and I think also in the States, only had the Real Player, because of course, the main problem was bandwidth at the time. It was the Real Player could do it with the bandwidth. It was, some of you might still remember, it was ISDN, it was called, how you connected your computers. And nevertheless, I thought, wow, what I've seen in Singapore will come to Germany and Europe at some point. And now it's time to shed the chains and start building up a business that we as independent filmmakers would cut out all the middlemen and sell our films directly to our audience. May it be as scarce as it may be, they might still be enough that they can finance our film and maybe even the next one, and we would have some money to live on. So with that idea, I created a company. It was the time when you created companies on shares. You may remember that. It was really big, you know. It was before the dot-com crash. So I come from an Hanseatic city. I don't know if you know what that is. It was in the old time a trader's business. And the traders ganged up and signed shares to split the risk, because they didn't want to put all their goods on one ship. So they put their goods on 10 ships, and they also owned those ships together to split the risk. And with that narration, with that story, I addressed my fellow filmmakers and said, hey guys, it's time that we build a fleet of ships. It's an internet portal where we will show our films. And they all looked at me and said, oh, people want to see my films in the cinema, don't you know? I said, yeah, well, but you will see, they will want to see your film on the computer screen sooner or later, and they're watching them on the telly anyway. Yeah, they're watching them on the telly, but they want to see them on the big screen. I said, no offense meant, no offense taken. They can watch it on the big screen, but those who can't go there, and you know, they show them only for a day or 2 or 3, especially documentary films on the big screen, they might want to see it on the computer. So with that idea, we formed this company on shares as a collective. The collective part was that nobody could own more than 5% of this company, no matter how much shares he would own. So we made ourselves deliberately unattractive for venture capital. which was the first big mistake. And when I told that to some banker, he looked at me and said, "Don't you want to get rich?" I thought for a moment, I said, "Yeah, I'd love to get rich, but with my film, not with this company," because I had somehow understood that this marketplace that we were building would draw, of course, people who were interested in such films. And if it was not ours, we would pay high taxes to go on that marketplace in the near future. Amazon was not known at the time, you know, or maybe at some point they started selling books. I remember that. But you know, we had foreseen all that was going to happen, and that we would build our own monopoly with our goods, which was the stories told, the stuff that people wanted to see. And we really thought, like United Artists at some point before us in history, we should own our own distribution mechanisms at least. And we started that at the time when suddenly in the internet it became possible to share films. And how did people share films? They used a system called torrents. BitTorrent may still sound familiar to you. It was a genius engineered tool, because at the time when we started, our local telco company told us, if you want to deliver a film, it was standard definition, it was about 1.5 gigabyte for a 90-minute film. Then you have to pay us that we deliver that to your customer per delivered film, 12 euro for 1.5 gigabyte. That was the price of the traffic at the time. It was deliberately held high. It was completely preventive for any business case whatsoever. But then this BitTorrent thing came around, and they could, how do you say, they could bring this bandwidth shortage and this high price down, because you shared your bandwidth with all those that had this film already on their computer. So if there were 10 people out there who had the film on the computer, you started downloading it, you downloaded it from those 10 different computers in little packages, and it assembled on your hard disk from those 10 computers, was assembled, and then you could watch it. It was a genius tool, and it brought piracy to the max, which of course was terrible for us, because actually we wanted to sell our films. Okay. Any questions so far? I can go on, I can easily fill these 20 minutes. No, how much do we still have? Yeah, 20 minutes with the history of this, because we are still in 2005. We started in 2000. It took us 5 years to start the first streaming site. We started that at Berlinale 2005 with, I think, 50 films. Andrew, you have switched up your mic. I can't hear you. Nobody can hear you, actually.
So my question is, now we're at 2005, 2006, 2007, which is when Netflix really started streaming. So I would like you to draw the coincidence of Netflix as a solution to the piracy problem by having cheap prices.
Yeah. Okay. So you have piracy, and you got people used to getting everything for free, not anything, everything for free. So if you look at it from our perspective, being filmmakers, it's of course terrible, because we want to sell our films. We want to sell them at a good price. We want to sell them at the price of a DVD, cut down for the windfall profits of digitization. So instead of selling it for 20 euro from the shop, where the shop actually takes 10, and the rec jobber takes another 5, and somebody else takes another 2. So in the end, you as a filmmaker, producer, got 2 out of the 20. You wanted to sell it for, say, 6 or 8 euro and keep 4 or 3 of it. That would have been really nice for the audience and for you as a filmmaker. It would have been a win-win situation. But the piracy came along. You could get all these films for free on the internet, on the Pirate Bay, for example, or later on YouTube as well. Then Netflix came along and looked at it from the outside view. They were from the outside. I mean, they were distributing DVDs. You may remember that as a DVD to lend. They were sending them in little envelopes. But they are from outside, and they are disruptive. We were from the inside, and if you are from inside a business, you can't be disruptive, because you're just too biased. You have too much experience, you know too many people, it's impossible. So Mr. Reed Hastings, he was disruptive. He said, okay, look at it from a business perspective. If people get a very good service, actually what happened was that the government was breathing down the necks of the pirates pretty harshly everywhere. So people slowly got a little bit scared to pirate stuff because everybody suddenly knew somebody who had to pay a big fine. So people were at the ready to pay a little bit for content, but not too much. And that was the time when Retastings came with Netflix and said, hey, why don't you pay $10 a month? And I will give you more than you can ever watch. It's like flat rate drinking in a way, right? And that of course works out because suddenly you say, wow, I look at this, I see a lot of stuff, I pay a little money, I can stop the subscription at any time. This looks like a good deal. And what he did, he created Lightower projects that got a lot of attention. Just think about Breaking Bad or stuff like that. And with these films, he got the people in. And then with this very clever algorithms and audience understanding artificial intelligence, he knew his recommendation system. He really learned very fast what people would want and what people would keep on being subscribers. I actually met him, not by accident, because I went when he released Netflix in Germany. So I was standing in this long line of people and I moved up, and at some point I was next to Mr. Hastings. I said, Mr. Hastings, I'm representing 1,500 independent film producers from Germany, and I have this little venture here and I would really like to talk. He said, oh, I love indie films. We love indie films, he said, but we don't do business with them. And that was it. Then a very nice blonde girl who was next in line came and got his attention. And that's the problem. They don't do business with indie films. I mean, if you read the trade press, at some point, everybody was going to Sundance. I think it's right now or in the next days. And they were all hoping that Sundance, some big streamer, Netflix, would buy their film. At the beginning, they did that. But then I think the last two Sundances, they didn't anymore because they are now doing their own originals. They know exactly what their audience wants and they do only that. And I read this very interesting article just today. It was sent to me by a colleague from Britain about the local press that is dying all over the States. And you know much better than I know for sure that a lot of in the United States, they don't have local newspapers anymore because it just doesn't pay. And he's a filmmaker as well. And he said, couldn't there be a parallel to the power of the international streaming companies now that we are all losing? We are of course talking about Europe and all these little states here and our proud of having our own sort of mentality everywhere, Germany, Britain, France, that the streamers will bring the same effect that this lack of local newspapers has to our local culture, because everybody is, you know, it's all about 24 hours of streaming time per day, which you can't even see. We are all now in competition for each other's eyeballs. And a lot of these eyeballs now watch Netflix, or they watch YouTube, Google, or they watch Amazon. And that is a really huge danger, especially if you remember what Retastings said to me. We love indie films, but we don't do business with them. So we have this monopoly of things, and we had it before, actually. There was a time when in Germany, we were only watching Dallas and Denver and all that. And at some point it stopped, and we had a proliferation, I think is the word, of channels because of the digitization. I'm not talking linear TV. And then slowly people understood that they want to see actually German stories told and so on. And we are very lucky in Germany because we still have public television. It gets 8 billion per year on license fees, and the license fee has to be paid by any household. No, again, every household and even every company. So there's 8 billion euros per year put into content from Germany. They also buy some foreign films, but and they do a lot for information and diversity. Not enough. I mean, we are constantly criticizing them, but compared to the US, where I know public television has a niche existence, here it's not niche. Here it's still big. but of course it's very endangered because it's very linear. They slowly understand they have to be also VOD driven. They have to have mediatheks. They can't take you hostage anymore. I think linear television is like taking you hostage, right? You want to see the news or your favorite show or your talk show with politicians. You want to see it when you are ready to see it and not when they broadcast it. That's kind of the old game. And they very, very slowly now understand it, but they are very slow in it. And they might not be fast enough. Because very many of my friends and I myself, I catch myself, oh no, terrible program. Let's switch to Netflix. Let's switch to Amazon Prime. I have both of it. I love some of it. It's really great. It's fantastic stuff that they serve us. But I'm also lacking a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, let me ask you another question, Guy.
Sure.
So if you think about the subsidies that, of course, German, English, French, television gives to television, and then we ignore the subsidies that go to Netflix and other streamers, don't we? We're not even aware of the subsidies they get.
Now, I'm aware of those 6 billion.
Highway, wouldn't you say that's roughly 50% of what you pay at the gasoline station, or 50% of an airline ticket, or very heavy taxes on voice communications, whether they're from Verizon or AT&T or whatever, those are taxed, but the internet businesses are not taxed. At the same time, they also can sell way below cost, which is totally antitrust, because they have, for example, with Netflix, how many billions of dollars of debt? Mm-hmm. So when you think about it from a 1962 point of view, this is totally, totally inappropriate and antitrust.
Yeah,
would you say? I mean,
absolutely. I mean, it's debated right now in Europe very strongly that we need antitrust laws against those big companies. I know it's also debated in the US now, actually worldwide. Today there was this thing on the news with Google wanting to close in Australia if they put a license fee on what they are doing. So yeah, it's about that, and we will see antitrust action if our governments still have the power to implement it.
Well, it seems to me that the power is to say, you know what, if you don't pay a tax or whatever you want to call it, then you can't show these films in this particular territory. In the same way, when films were distributed, you had to pay certain fees to have these films distributed. China, in fact, is the only one that I can see that's a big market that is still doing this. And everybody said, right, you're a big market, so we pay attention. The small markets, not so much.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but even in China, you may remember that the at that time foreign minister Mrs. Clinton, she was attacking China in favor of Google, and at that time there was a picture. It was called Obama dinner, and all the guys from the West Coast were sitting there around the table, and that was the moment when I understood that in the US the idea of sort of having this big foothold of the world is also supported by the government very strongly. So they got all the help from the government that they could become worldwide companies, make their money there, and be the next, after the industry, be the next big player in the US. And they were very successful with that.
It's not just Netflix, but it's Facebook and
yeah,
Google.
They were all around that table. Yeah.
Started
Apple
in the 90s when it wasn't just Obama, it was before that Clinton who said, this is cool. Let's not tax them.
Exactly. And now in Europe and Brussels, they're called the GAFA, right? Google, Amazon, Facebook. I forgot the last one. Apple, of course. Yeah. And they are very high on the agenda of the politicians now. They have really understood what's going on there, but they have no idea how to stop it. Not really. Maybe Mrs. Vestager will text them again. But but they have so clever lawyers, they have so well designed, they have so understood how the European system works and how they can play with it, how they can divide and rule in Europe. And on a very low level, we are just fighting because Netflix is trying to, I mean, they are producing in different European territories because they also know, and for some law, they also have to produce some stuff there. And they know that the people want to see themselves on television. People always like to see themselves in a way, right? Their own story, their own culture. And now we are fighting from our guilds of directors, for example, for a fair remuneration from Netflix. And they say, okay, if you have 10 million fulfillers that watch your series, and if there's 90 minutes, they have to watch, I think, 95% of that. Then we will pay you some extra money for the authors and directors. And that's pretty much. So
well,
nobody ever will get an extra payment.
When you think about everybody else has to pay the music rights, the author's rights, the actor's rights, all of the creative people are paid in Europe the same as the music people are paid in the US. But by going on Netflix and by going on other streaming platforms, the creative people in these percentages, which are based on theatrical revenues, have no more money.
Yeah, that's a big issue.
Because in the end, if a small person can't say to their collaborators, you can get a share of the revenue, and the big companies can't either, the big producers, Christopher Nolan and so on, don't you think that they'll say, you know what, maybe we'll just hold back because this is not fair that you don't pay any normal license fees to all of the profit participants or all the laborers?
No, they're not strong enough. I mean, the system in Europe, and especially continental Europe, is so much different to that of the US. You have the guilds that really worked well, and they were on strike. The Authors Guild was on strike, and now you have the residuals, which are negotiated on by the guilds pretty much on eye level because they are afraid that the authors might strike again. But in Germany and France and other countries, we don't have so strong guilds. And we also, even though we have the author's rights system, which in theory gives us a better position, in practical, it's not a better position. We're all blackmailed. And if you raise your voice and say, no, this is not fair, you will be blacklisted. It's really, really terrible. And we've been lobbying very hard on European law to get something we call contractual law that helps us be stronger, even though we are the smaller partner towards these big conglomerates. And also that they have to remunerate us fairly in perspective to the use of our works, right? So they brought us in a very good position that way. But now, of course, Netflix is doing this divide and rule and is negotiating one by one with the guilds from Denmark to Slovenia to France, different things. We are trying to hinder them, but of course, it's very hard. They have a master plan, which they are executing right now.
So what we find is that streaming has flourished because enormous tax subsidies, because they are not charged what everybody else is charged, neither from the American part, because they're cool, according to Clinton, Obama, etc., and from other sources, which are the taxing sources, which is, forget about it. They're a new industry, so let them be.
It is very important to understand that the government was closing the eyes on that because they wanted content to be available, hopefully, mostly even freely, because they wanted the pipes to be laid in the ground. And that was an expensive thing to do, to put first copper, wire copper, and then later fiber optics into the ground. Very, very expensive. And for that, they needed enough content out there. So even the piracy was not fought as it should have been, because it was so important that people really wanted that pipe into their home, because they have understood very early that the internet is a necessity and that everybody needs to be connected. I don't know if they want to, I think it's eavesdrop on them, I think this has far too rarely been talked about, except for by Mr. Snowden. But I think it was both. It was also a thing of bringing the economy forward, but I think it's more behind it also. Was actually my first film was about that. My first feature film was about controlling people through that trash can by rescanning the code. So you could find out what a household had consumed, bring it together with all the other data. Was all before artificial intelligence.
How would we get to see this film? Now here you own the rights.
It's only in German. I'm sorry, I never even had a subtitled version. It was shown on Berlinale in I was 25, that's a while ago, 87. And in Variety it said Wesnick shows potential, which of course was really nice. But well, it never traveled. So it was shown on ZDF public channel, and I had this couple of TV screenings, and now it's on onlinefilm.org. I can send it to you, but it's in German, so you won't understand.
I love it. Well, we'll look it up every word, or we'll get it dubbed by some activist here.
It's not such a big issue anymore. I should actually do that. So maybe I will, and I will send it to you. We are running out of time. I don't know, any questions? Maybe you want to give it to the floor?
Give it to the floor, or anybody wants to sort of continue this, just email me and we'll make a subgroup that meets a month from now, because I think this is an extremely political as well as artistic.
Patricia was asking about subscriptions was a la carte. I just closed down onlinefilm.org, which was completely a la carte because it just didn't work at all. Subscription is the thing, the flat rate drinking or the flat rate watching is the thing. You can't. We had to close down our a la carte website because we couldn't bring the filmmakers to do the promotion. I always say a film is a little bit of celluloid, or now zeros and ones, and a lot of marketing. It's taken from an old cigarette factory guy who said that about a cigarette. It's a little bit of tobacco and a lot of marketing, but it's the same with any film. And especially if you create niche films, you have to do a lot of marketing to get this niche to know about your film. And that costs a lot. Yeah.
Let me tell you about the new niche film places. So Showcase Cinemas, which is a big company owned by National Amusements, which also owns Paramount Pictures, one of the studios, CBS, one of the big networks, and Viacom, one of the biggest international companies. This is a force, and they, in June of 2020, decided to push back against Netflix and everybody else by having their own streaming service with a different curating practice. So go to Showcase Cinemas, Showcase Now, and it's a la carte, and it's a completely, not completely different, but somewhat different than the other streamers in the sense that it has tours of museums, musical documentaries, theater the stuff that plays an opera, and it's plus independent films. And I think they are a leader because they're powerful and they're going to get all the Paramount films. And the second one is AMC, which is owned by the Chinese, which is the largest company in America and the largest company in the world. And once the Chinese ownership and AMC decided on a strategy going forward, this is a force that actually is bigger than Netflix. And if they combine with Alibaba, it's bigger than Amazon. So I would say there is a force there. It just has to be recognized and in a way honored by being pioneers in the pushback against what I think is a subsidized industry that is pretty much against the antitrust rules.
I think we should subsidize rather a platform like that willingly and openly to say that we need a platform that supplies us the diversity we need. I did also my self-promotion. I put a link to Next Online Film in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you
so much, Kai. And thank you so much, Andrew, for this wonderful talk, very informative. And now, one moment.